Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is October 3rd, 2022. On February 14th of this year, I published one of my most time-intensive videos to produce, titled Pluto in Aquarius, Dawn of Global Consciousness. That episode was almost an hour long, and at that time I was quite concerned about producing an episode that would be too lengthy. I felt like an hour was pushing it. So I didn't go into a lot of detail about the darker or more challenging side of Pluto transiting Aquarius. And I want to do that here. As I said, I went into a fair amount of detail about how Pluto transiting Aquarius, commencing in 2023 through 2044, was going to affect society and our experience. And I also discussed how it had been manifesting as it transited Capricorn, which is what we're experiencing right now. So I'm not going to revisit all of that detail here. Obviously, that would be redundant. So I strongly encourage you to listen to that episode prior to listening to this one if you haven't already. I'll put a link to it in the description of this episode. Now, during this over 20-year transit, there will, of course, be many other transits occurring during that time, any one of which, if it's significant, could have dramatic implications in the world. So don't think that Pluto transiting Aquarius is the only thing that's going to be going on. There is always a constantly changing astrological climate, so to speak, at play. So this will just be one of the important backdrops to all of that, one of the major themes. In brief, the way Pluto works is that it will, through experiences and awareness, draw your attention to wherever there is darkness. Darkness meaning things like trauma, fear, grief, anger, resentment, empowerment versus disempowerment, control, domination, those kinds of things. So when people are going through a significant Pluto transit and they happen to know anything about astrology, some fear around that can arise because, you're dealing with darker aspects of yourself, and we all have them. If you have karma whatsoever, or you need to incarnate here, I would argue that you have darkness that needs to be healed, resolved, understood, integrated, or whatever. And I myself, because I've been here for a reasonably long time, have had several major Pluto transits, and also because I am generally engaged in doing spiritual work, I deliberately and consciously make an effort to do my shadow work Pluto. And as a result, I have some familiarity and experience of dealing with the kinds of issues that Pluto will put in your face when you go through a challenging Pluto transit. And Pluto is so intense and deep and powerful that you can't really avoid dealing with whatever comes up. If you don't confront it consciously and deliberately, it'll be put into your experience, and sometimes quite dramatically through outer events that seem to be conspiring against you. In fact, what Pluto is trying to do is to get you to purge your darkness. They can be extremely difficult and challenging transits, but they can also be the most enlightening and the most liberating transits if you work with these energies. For example, I had Pluto square my moon for several years. Pluto is a very slow-moving planet. Its orbit is roughly 248 years. So generally, transits to personal planets or points can take several years to transpire. And when Pluto squared my moon, it brought to my awareness a tremendous amount of subconscious stuff that at times was shocking because I wasn't even aware that I had all of that stuff within me. And some of it can be kind of dark, and that's Pluto's role, Lord of the underworld. And it can manifest in your outward experience as well, where aspects of your life can go through dramatic and significant changes. So far, I've just given you kind of a brief synopsis or overview of why Plutonian transits are so powerful and deep and significant. And if it's transiting a house, it can take many years to transit through one of your houses in your chart. Transits to planets or points, like I said, generally take a few years, depending on retrogrades and so on. And so now globally, we've been dealing with Pluto transiting Capricorn, and Capricorn rules the structures and governance and institutions and power centers of our society. And we have been seeing how many of those aspects of society and our governance and things like that and corporate realms, we have been seeing how many of them are corrupt, defunct, out of step with current reality. There have been abuses of power that are just obscene. I mean, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a great example. It's just completely over the top. The benefit to all this, though, is that it's showing us where we need to rejuvenate, restore, revisit, revise, and update a lot of those structures of our world. New policies. How do we prevent these kinds of things from happening? How do we stop idiots like Putin from even being in a position to do what he's doing? And it'll take many years to integrate all that stuff. But as Pluto transits Capricorn, we're becoming extremely aware of all of the dark aspects of those areas of life so that we can transform and heal them. Pluto is often described as being like the phoenix that rises from the flames of destruction. So we destroy all of these defunct and decrepit means of governance and leadership and authority, and then we renew them, and they get to be born again in a much better, healthier way. It's kind of like clearing out the dead wood. If you've ever pruned a tree, it can look quite scary, but then after a year or two, it is amazing how much new growth comes back, and some trees and shrubs really benefit from a good pruning when you know what you're doing. That's the positive side of all this. We're still in the middle of all this crazy insanity. So we haven't yet seen, and we probably won't for years yet, but we haven't yet seen the benefit of these horrible experiences, these very challenging and difficult experiences. So now Aquarius, or the 11th house, where Pluto is going to begin transiting in 2023, it'll make some forays into Aquarius and then it'll retrograde back into Capricorn. And so this transition from Capricorn into Aquarius is going to take about a year and a half or so until Pluto finally settled in there. But we'll start to get a sense of how this is going to play out fairly quickly. Now I'm using the house and the sign interchangeably here. They are not exactly the same thing, but for the purposes of this exercise, it'll suffice. This isn't an astrology class. And Aquarius, the 11th house, is very different energy from the 10th. The 10th is these structures and institutions, and the 11th, or Aquarius, is how society and the people benefit from all of the stuff that precedes it. Because societies and people are actually more important than institutions and power brokers and stuff like that. Aquarius is really about all of us. And in the contemporary context, it literally means all of us in the sense that it's global. And I have also talked a lot about this age of Aquarius and how that's going to play out. It's about society and egalitarianism, ultimately. Part of this Pluto transiting Aquarius, though, is going to be showing us how those areas of life and those areas of our society are defunct and decrepit. We're going to become aware of how things are broken or how things are not valid or in the highest good of all. or that where things aren't egalitarian. So we're probably going to very quickly start to become aware of where corruption exists within the context of broader societal values and human rights, and how some nations hoard while others are starving. I mean, think about all the humanitarian stuff, right? I mean, ideally, everything we're doing really is about, or should be about, making a better world for everybody. But along the way, power and wealth and resources and influence gets corrupted because it gets concentrated in the hands of a few. That doesn't really fit into the Aquarian energy at all. And so all of that stuff, wherever things are broken, wherever things, like I said, are defunct or limited or need to be renewed or destroyed so that we can build better systems, we're going to start thinking about and questioning, why are things the way they are? What is preventing us from having a truly egalitarian world? Why do people have to pay for what are effectively essential things? I'm just making things up to give you some food for thought. But why do people have to pay for things that are essential for survival? That could be food, water, medicine, healthcare, education. Wherever there is a lack of egalitarianism, that stuff is going to be put in our faces very powerfully, directly, and probably dramatically. So organizations like the United Nations or other humanitarian organizations, or the policies of governments, the hoarding of power, of wealth, of influence, how we don't act in each other's highest good, all of that stuff is going to become very apparent to us, and it's going to need to be addressed. And at times, we're probably going to be shocked by what we see about how corrupt and unfair things are. But the benefit of that is that we will then get to, during this transit through 2044, fix all that stuff and make it better, make it work. The way this kind of works is that if we don't do the work, if we don't transform those things in the way that meshes with the energies of Aquarius, we're going to have some real problems. Like, you can't be in resistance to this energy, or it can become very destructive. But we have quite a bit of time to do this. So those of us, and I really believe, it seems to me, that many of the people who listen to me are very egalitarian, very high-minded, sincere and spiritual seekers and thinkers. We really all have this almost kind of corny vision of the world and how it should be. But I think that's rooted in our connection with our spiritual higher selves. Because on the spiritual dimension, there is no separation or need or lack. We all are equal, and we all have everything we need to exist. And we want to see that manifested here on Earth. And that's what we're going to be going through, is what is limiting us, what's blocking us, what's interfering with us, what is causing pain and suffering. And, like the fact that people are starving when there's more than enough food for everyone on the planet, it's obscene, and it's stupid, and it's ridiculous. It's really gross, right? When you think about it. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to be dealing with, is all the darkness that doesn't reflect those kinds of higher Aquarian ideals. Now, Aquarius also deals with things like communication and technology. For example, I would not be in the least bit surprised if we were to find out that the extent of government surveillance and logging of our digital footprints is far more extensive and creepy than we already know. And what we know already is very Orwellian. So we will probably become aware of stuff about, things like social media and technology and how it may harm us in some ways. Well, we're already kind of aware of that. But I would say that those sectors are going to be kind of in for a bruising if they aren't really serving the highest good of all. And if they are actually consciously or knowingly, or at least aware of the fact that their methodologies are harming people. That's not to say they shouldn't exist. It's just to say that their values will be questioned, and they may need to make a lot of adjustments. Now, there may be some companies out there, tech companies, who are actually motivated by very high ideals, and they will rise to the top. Their energies will flow very powerfully. So we could see a lot of changes in the area of technology and communications and the internet. The 11th house also covers hopes and dreams and wishes. We can expect that in many ways we will collectively experience a reality check and become clear about what our true motivations are and whether they are in the collective highest good or not. And this may be rather painful and difficult as we come to realize what actually motivates us, whether it's sustainable, desirable, or realistic. But by the time this transit is through, we will likely have transformed our ambitions and desires fairly dramatically. And from my perspective, this is something that we need to do desperately, because the path that we have been on is literally unsustainable. Again, I've talked a lot about that kind of stuff in the Pluto and Aquarius Dawn of Global Consciousness video, so I don't really want to go into that here. Aquarius can also be aloof and detached, more mental than heart-oriented. So as I discussed in my prior episode on this topic, there can be issues with not being heart-centered, leading to things like technocratic ways of handling problems. I just want to, like I said, make you aware of the drama and how Pluto will force us to do the shadow work that relates to Aquarian and 11th house kind of issues. It's going to be very exciting. Now, like I said, I don't fear shadow work. I personally confront it very directly and head on, because I think that we grow and evolve very quickly when we do that, when we don't try and pretend that we don't have the shadow stuff to do and that we take responsibility for it. I want to get it out of the way so that I can have a more enlightened experience. But there will be people who will be in resistance to this. And there will be people who are moving society forward in a positive way with respect to 11th house and Aquarian principles. And those people are going to become fairly prominent in a positive way. The people who are doing the very good social and egalitarian type work and who are affiliated with Aquarian type causes are going to come into much more prominence. We will also see the media starting to reflect and discuss and talk about Aquarian type values. It's just like this energy comes into our global consciousness on a mundane level. Mundane is the term we use when we speak about astrology and how it affects the world as opposed to us personally. And so on a mundane level, we're going to see all of these kinds of energies and influences come into play much more broadly. The shift can be such that you don't even recognize it happening. It just kind of takes place, and sometimes you need to look at it in hindsight before you can really fully appreciate it. But yeah, the darkness is going to be exposing all of the unconscious ways in which Aquarian and 11th house values are corrupted or distorted. So there you go. Thanks for everything. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Please see my community tab on YouTube for updates and articles and podcasts and things like that that I find of interest. And click the bell next to the subscribed button to receive alerts when I post a new video. Having said that, some of my episodes include visual elements, which, of course, would only be available on YouTube, in case you are listening to this via podcast. Also, join my contact list. I won't spam it. I'm just collecting your contact information in case there are ever any problems with this platform. Follow me on Twitter at Aquarian_Diary. All the best. Thanks for your support. Thank you for your phenomenal comments and for sharing and liking these videos and for subscribing. Talk to you soon. Take care. And we're getting really close to Pluto shifting into Aquarius. Bye for now.